I'm delighted to be here. I have to admit, I'm a little bit nervous. I mean, there's almost 70 of you on the chat box. And although we had 240 people on one of the POOLaide webinars, I didn't have to do most of the talking, right? You're here to hear from me for the next 60 minutes. So it is a little bit nerve-wracking, but I will do my best. And I so appreciate that you spending an hour with me today. It is Wednesday, July 22nd. Who would have thought in the middle of our busiest time of year, the summer season, that we would have the opportunity to stop and watch these webinars that have so connected our industry in a way that I hope continues on for the rest of our careers, because this is a fabulous way to connect. I see names that I recognize from Saskatchewan, Newfoundland and Labrador, all over Ontario, Loudoun County, Virginia. I'm sure there's many of you lurking that are not comfortable popping that information in the chat box, but I want to extend to you a huge welcome and thank you so much for being here today. So my plan over the next hour is I'm going to share some lessons and some learning. The session will be about 55 minutes of me talking, and then, as Marian mentioned, I'm very happy to answer any questions that you have, whatever they are, big or small. I will say from the get-go that I'm not any different from you. I don't have all the answers. What I do have is an opinion, and my opinion is based in years in this industry, as well as being very well read, staying current on trends across Canada, across the United States, and really bringing all of that information together to benefit you, whether you're following us on Facebook, following us on Instagram, or whether in the future we decide to have a client relationship. So without further ado, let's jump right in. The session today is called Aquatic Lessons After COVID-19, Learning and Leading. So the first thing I want to say off the cuff is that the coronavirus pandemic obviously is not over. So take that with a grain of salt, that the lessons we have learned in the last 4 months of being physically distant, shelter-in-place practices across North America, we still have a ways to go and we don't know what the future holds. So please do understand that the things that I share with you today, maybe 6 months from now, we'll have a shift again within our industry. But that is one of the amazing things I love about the aquatics industry, and each and every single one of you on this call. You are flexible, you are adaptable, you are resilient, and you can take this change that we are experiencing in 2020 and mold it for your family life, for your team, for your workplace, for your facility, and really come out on the other side inspired and engaged that this is not the end, right? This is just a new beginning. So let me click ahead. A little bit of information about me. Some of you may have met me during the POOLaide webinars, which I will talk about in a few moments, was a series of webinars that I hosted from March to May. I grew up in Ottawa, capital of Canada. I spent most of my early years in Ontario. I started as a lifeguard at 16, as so many of us do. It was a lifelong dream to become a lifeguard and a swim instructor. I have a December birthday, so that was a little bit extra painful, but I got there eventually. Spent several summers working at an outdoor summer camp, moved on to work at the University of Toronto during my undergraduate degree, consistently worked in aquatics, and then found myself coming back to aquatics after I completed my graduate degree in 2011. Those of you of a certain age will remember that the economy in 2011 was barely shades better than it is now after the 2008 economic crash. There were very few jobs for young people that had any sort of stability, benefits, hours or wages that you could live off of, especially in urban areas like the city of Toronto. So in 2013, I moved out to Alberta. I was very, very lucky to get a job out in Alberta in a place called Lakeview. It's very funny because I grew up in Francophone Ottawa, and I learned very quickly in Alberta that it's not Lakeview, it is literally Lakeview. That is just how it's said in Alberta. And there is a large Francophone community there, but it was a small town of 2,500 people. I learned so much in that position as a municipal aquatic facility manager. You become a jack of all trades in a smaller town. You're doing everything from hiring, performance management, recruiting, strategic planning, capital renovations, pool operations, marketing, parades, floats. You do so many things in a small town, and I'm forever grateful to that municipality for every opportunity that they gave me as a young aquatic professional. I think I was 26 when I moved out from Ontario. And they handed me a pool and they said, go. And it was an incredible experience. I then finished up my municipal career at the town of High River, which some of you will know from the dramatic 2013 flooding that occurred. So a slightly bigger town of 15,000, where I was able to really have a lot of opportunities again to develop my skill set and work within a community. All of that came to a head as I started my own business, Lakeview Aquatic Consultants, in 2017, and I switched to working for myself full-time in 2018. And I'm very privileged right now to work for myself full-time. I do contracts with many municipalities, many clients in Alberta, across Canada, and even some coaching with US clients. And I'm thrilled to be able to share what I have learned with you today, because I really want to speak to skills and strategies that are helpful to any person on this call, whether you operate a private swim school, whether you are a municipality with a year-round swimming pool, whether you're an outdoor pool in a small community. There are lessons that we can all take from different sides of the industry, and I didn't realize how much I was missing from the private sector until I joined it. So I hope I can share some of those lessons with you today, as well as how the coronavirus has impacted us all and how we can move forward in a constructive and professional way. So I want to start first with Alberta. I get a lot of questions. What is Alberta really like? And as an Ontarian who moved out to Alberta in 2013, I had only ever been here for 5 days. I didn't know what to expect. We always talk about Western Canada or west of the prairies, on the prairies, as something a little bit different. I didn't know what to expect. I did think that there were cows and ranches and mountains and oil, and I really didn't know what that meant. And so I like to always explain to anybody, wherever you're located in our great country or in the United States or internationally, that that is one essence of who we are, but that is not who I am in its entirety. What Alberta represents to me is our amazing aquatic industry. So Alberta has a tradition starting in the 1970s of investing significantly in the aquatic industry. And that is because of our natural gas and oil revenues. There has been a desire to invest in infrastructure in a meaningful way that will draw in the families of workers to relocate to Alberta. So we do have many people who may commute from either Mississauga or St. John's, Newfoundland, or Edmonton, New Brunswick. People do commute to Alberta to work 15 days on, 10 days off. But the province has worked hard to build some incredible swimming pools. And the number one thing people don't believe me when I say this about Alberta is we have the most incredible swimming pools. And so some examples I've popped on the screen are some of my favorites. Down here in the lower left, we have the Seaton Brookfield YMCA in South Calgary. It's about 15 minutes up the road from me in Okotoks. And the significance of this pool is that it is literally the largest YMCA in the world at 440,000 square feet. And it took the title away from a pool we have in the northwest of Calgary, the Rocky View YMCA that was built about a year ago, and it clocks in at 400,000 square feet. We've got Village Square up here in the middle. This is just a regular community pool in a lower income portion of Calgary with beautiful decor, beautiful baffles. We've got West Edmonton Mall, which many of you might be familiar with, which is the largest, currently the largest indoor water park in the world. It's in Edmonton. And then we've got the town of Raymond. So the illustration of the town of Raymond, this pool is to show you that we have some incredible small communities that are building fabulous swimming pools, not just a box, but literally with diving boards, water slides, hot tubs or spas, beach entry. This is a tiny town of 3,500. I had a client I worked with 2 weeks ago called the Village of Forestburg, 800 people, 400 households. They had a 6-lane, 25-meter pool with a beach entry and a hot tub and a water mushroom, and it's a town of 800. It's a village of 800. And I don't say all of this to say that one province or one sector of our industry is better than the other, but it's to provide that perspective that sometimes my friends and my colleagues in Ontario don't understand, that we do have a very robust aquatic industry here, And I've been very privileged to have a lot of opportunities because everyone here has been so welcoming and so willing to learn and share. And so that's where my spirit of sharing has really come from in the last 8 years that I've been in Alberta. Everything I give is because everything I have received comes from those people that have built me up. When I first moved out here, all the way back to 18 years ago when I did my Aqua Leaders and my NL in Ottawa. Okay, so that spirit of sharing is really what is fundamental in aquatics and what was behind the POOLaide webinars. And so I really hope that you can feel that when we talk today about lessons that I can bring to you and that you can bring to others. So a little bit about my business. It's called Lakeview Aquatic Consultants. It was founded in 2017. And the only reason I founded my business was because my husband had a stroke. I was never intending to start my own business. I never intended to work for myself. It was completely by fluke. I was a contract instructor, as so many of you are. I worked at different pools, teaching primarily instructor courses because I am a trainer for the Life Saving Society of all streams. So for example, a first aid instructor clinic or a National Lifeguard instructor clinic, that sort of thing. And I got to a point when I moved to Southern Alberta that I'd had a bad experience with one particular pool. And my husband said, well, why don't you just run your own courses for your own company and then you'll make all of the money. And I said to him, you know, I have a full-time job. I don't have the time to take registrations, to have a website, to do social media. I mean, it's a lot of work. All of you know this from programming. It's a lot of work to manage registrations, manage finances, manage staffing and scheduling. And it just got to a point after he had a stroke that I really felt that it was the time to start doing something a little bit for me. I was very giving to my community. I always did the best job that I could, but I really needed to focus on what was going to be beneficial for us and our household. And so I started Lakeview Aquatic Consultants, and I focused primarily on teaching certified pool operator courses. So I am an instructor for the Pool and Hot Tub Alliance, which used to be known as the National Swimming Pool Foundation. And I started teaching courses in Ontario, actually, because my mother, who lives in Ottawa, she said, when are you coming to visit? Can't you expense a trip to come and visit me? And so that's how I got started teaching those courses in Ontario. And over time, as I switched to my business full-time in 2018, I really expanded our services. I continued to do Life Saving Society courses in Alberta. I am a master instructor trainer for the Red Cross as a research conductor, so I've been very lucky to meet many of you in different provinces as a WSIT providing research, and then also teaching CPO, coaching, consulting, working with everyone from hotels, private swim schools to municipalities. Everything has been, it's been an incredible journey. It's a lot of work. And the big thing is just, I love the flexibility and the freedom that I think many people have discovered during the coronavirus pandemic. I started working from home for myself about 2 years ago, and it's incredible. As an introvert, it's been incredible. And so I am sympathetic to those of you that struggled to make the shift during the coronavirus, but there are many benefits for some people. The tie-in to POOLaide is that Lakeview was just chugging along as a business. It was running the way I expected it to run. We had a very busy January, February. I was in Ontario throughout February teaching courses, and March was going to be just another normal month. And then we all know what happened, right? So February rolled into March. Those of you with seasonal pools, right, you're starting to think about recruiting to open for the May long weekend. Those of you who have summer programming, that's your biggest programming of the year, everything just came to a halt, right? That's the reality. So I've put together a little calendar because I want to set you up to understand how the POOLaide webinars happened and the steps that I took, as well as giving you some background to how I knew to start the webinars. And the only way I can really do this is with a calendar, because there's so much, you know, it was such a time period when things were changing. Things continue to change, obviously. We're in July, and every province, every state, every county or region has their own protocols for health and safety. And we continue to see broadcasts, whether it's from our premiers, whether it's from our health authorities. Things are still constantly changing, but they're not changing as rapidly as they were back in March. March, if you'll remember, was every hour of every day there was different information and different place to focus. So back in March, I had a really light calendar, and so I knew about the coronavirus from a personal experience back in January. So back in January, my husband and I had taken a vacation. We typically vacation after Christmas break because, like an aquatics professional, right, those dates between Christmas and New Year's or the kids going back to school can be very busy for programming. We typically try and holiday early December or late January. So we were on a cruise in January, and on January 23rd, I flew home from Florida to Toronto to Calgary, and I had to go through customs at Pearson Airport on January 23rd, which was the day or the evening after China had entered the COVID lockdown, including Wuhan, because the first documented COVID cases outside of China were starting to materialize in places like Thailand, the United States. And so I landed in Pearson Airport and I went to the customs hall, and I can viscerally remember the fear that hit me when I saw all the CBSA agents with masks, and I saw this mass of humanity, all of these international flights, and I thought, there could be the virus in this room right now, and I'm going to get on a flight, and I'm going to fly to Alberta, and then I'm going to go and teach courses next week in Medicine Hat, or sorry, in January it would have been in Calgary, and, you know, the virus became very real for me. And so I had that foresight that many Canadians didn't have, because we saw the virus as something other outside of Canada until it entered our communities in March. And so January to February to March, myself and my husband, we were closely following what was happening in Italy, the Diamond Princess cruise ship in Japan. And so that informs my own sense of how significant the coronavirus would be, which maybe was not the case for other Canadians. So we had our first case in Alberta on March 5th. I went to teach a CPO class in Medicine Hat, which is in southern Alberta, on the Monday, Tuesday. And on Tuesday, we had our first case announced in the Calgary area. Calgary is in the southern part of Alberta, close to the US border. That was very significant because that was the first transmitted case person to person, where it was not a case that somebody had been in China or had been on an airplane. Fast forward to Friday, March 13th, I had my first client phone call about the coronavirus and swimming pools. This was my first inkling of what was going to happen to the pool industry, because I honestly had not even thought about the pool industry yet. I had thought about my own personal safety. I had thought about safety protocols my household could take, but not about my industry, not about my job or my livelihood. That is definitely a blind spot that I will not make in the future. But Friday the 13th, things were changing rapidly by the hour. Sunday, March 15th, the Provincial Health Authority here, we have Dr. Hinshaw, she announced the closure on Monday of all recreation facilities that would accommodate more than 250 people. So your very large recreation centers, community centers, swimming pools were required to close. And we started to see as well a lot of smaller community pools. They saw the writing on the wall and they opted to close on Monday, Tuesday. But even then, things were changing rapidly. My yoga studio on Monday said, no, we have no plans to close. And then on Tuesday, they were forced to close. All pools were forced to close on Thursday, March 19th, which was quite early. I'm very grateful to my province for taking dramatic action. Whatever your political inklings or whatever, it was so helpful for us in this province. The way the POOLaide webinars came about is because on Monday the 16th and Monday the 17th, I was working with a resort client outside of Calgary, large resort, 700 rooms, on-site destination, you know, $400 a night, where they would typically be packed in the month of March. They would have people skiing, they would have people skating, it would just be busy. And when I arrived on Sunday night, they had an occupancy rate of 13%. So it became very apparent Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, working with their staff, overhearing staff be concerned about being laid off, overhearing that none of the revenue targets were being met in terms of occupancy, in terms of spa sales, in terms of food and beverage sales. It was very apparent right away what this meant for people going places. And on the afternoon of Tuesday, March 17th, it was like a telethon. I had call after call after call, the type of situation where you're texting somebody who's calling you on an incoming call while you're on a call, I'll call you back, but then trying to remember who called you first. It was a health and safety coordinator from a hotel chain in BC. It was a municipality that I work with frequently in Alberta. It was my swim school client in Ontario. It was everyone, and they didn't know what to do. And so it became apparent to me very quickly that we needed a source of information to share information very quickly. And I knew that I wouldn't be able to provide coronavirus information, that I am not a medical professional, I am not an immunologist, but that we would need to get that information sharing collaboration open. And for whatever reason, I will never know, I thought of webinars. I'm not a YouTuber, I've never done a web broadcast before, I barely do Instagram stories, I hadn't done Zoom calls before, but I just thought it would be great to have videos that people could watch and get that information very quickly, right? Because emails are time consuming. That's just kind of what happened. So starting on March 17th, I started calling people in my Rolodex, aquatic professionals that I have met through social media, through in-person interactions, and asking them if they could share on topics of their areas of expertise. And the reason I selected those areas was because I did recognize that nobody had the time or the capacity to build sessions the way I have built this session for the Pro Aquatic Conference. That takes time. And I knew instinctively that we were all going to be short time and that I wanted people to be able to draw from their experience in specific areas and just be able to share in a meaningful way. And so I got home on Tuesday night. I had lined up some presenters who said, yes, we'll donate our time. Just let us know when and where, we'll be there. And on Wednesday, March 18th, I sat down at my kitchen counter at about 7 a.m. and I built the POOLaide webinars. I had to learn how to host a webinar. I had to find a platform. I had to make advertising. I had to make registration links. I had to make a program guide. I had to set up sessions with each presenter to orient them to the software. I had to do the guidelines for the individual sessions for CEUs because we had multiple organizations providing continuing education units. In total, I sat at my kitchen counter for about 19 hours. I went to sleep at around 3 a.m. and I woke up on Thursday and I launched the POOLaide webinars after lunch. And that's pretty much what happened. They went viral. I shared them with a few select people, a few select groups. I posted them on the Lakeview Aquatic Consultants website on our Facebook page, and all of you did the rest. I mean, my goal was maybe 250 people over 16 webinars, and you guys blew it out of the water. I mean, aquatics people are overachievers, but I mean, I really had a low bar. I just wanted there to be some people who found value. The same way, I would never consider myself as an influencer, but anybody in our industry who influences one person, shares information with one person, is an influencer. So I just wanted to make sure we could share information. And then we started on Monday. So Monday, March 23rd was the first POOLaide webinar. Those of you who attended, shout out to Leslie from St. John's. We had so many tech issues. And Katie from Loudoun County, like it was, I wanted to cry in the middle of that webinar. Nothing worked the way I thought it would. It's very awkward being live, right? There's no backup, but we made it through. I had a good cry. My husband said, well, just whatever, you know, it'll go away. People will forget it. Just keep doing it. You spent so much time building this, just do it. And it got better. And presenting online is very hard. It requires a lot of coordination. I'm so grateful that Pro has a whole team of people on this session to support me and to support you guys as attendees to really make this a seamless experience, because it's a lot of coordination, let me tell you. It's not just turning on the camera and getting started. So that's pretty much how POOLaide started. We ran for 2 months. So we ran from March 23rd until May 22nd. So I did extend the webinars once or twice. And so at the end of it all, we had 1,500 participants, and these were unique participants. So and I can name many people I can think of who attended 10, 15, 20 webinars. There was a very devoted following, and I'm so touched and grateful to each of you. I know there's many of you on this session as well who came to those webinars, so thank you so much for your support. It meant so much to me. We did 48 hours live. We had 34 presenters, including various panelists, 27 different topics. All of the webinars you can find on YouTube. So if I'm speaking space language and you don't know what the POOLaide webinars were, go ahead later, look us up on YouTube. You can find them all. They are entirely free. And then there's the show notes so that you can self-study the topic and review the presentation the presenter gave. We had many different countries, and the big thing for me that I loved and I continue to love about sessions like this virtual conference is that it was one aquatic community. Whether you're in Alberta, Saskatchewan, Virginia, Ontario, Quebec, you know, the UK, Japan, we are all committed to water safety and drowning prevention, and we can all learn from each other. We all have the same staffing challenges. We all have the same ratepayer challenges. We all have the same budget challenges. We really do not need to reinvent the wheel. We really need to look outside of our little aquatic bubble and look around and see what other people are doing. And so that is the big thing for me. My passion project with these webinars was getting people to expand their network and expand their knowledge. Behind the scenes, so people ask me, what was it like behind the scenes? Well, I can tell you it's a lot of work. It was a lot of work. It is a lot of work to do something like this. Imagine programming an entire session in a couple of days, okay? So basically, if you were doing your fall 2020 programming, which I know many of you are struggling right now to do, what does September look like? What should we program? That's basically what I was doing. Is I was live programming, and so I was creating links, I was updating resources, I was coordinating with speakers, I was asking for presentations in advance, I was doing graphic design, I was doing social media. It is very, very intensive. And I did get some flack from some people for working as hard as I appeared to work. But I think the thing for me is that it really was a passion project, and it was also a business decision. So I am a for-profit business, and I can tell you that from March 10th to about April 29th, there was not a single drop of revenue because nobody had any money. People were laid off. Many municipalities shrunk their budgets, and so I was very much concerned that I wouldn't eat or be able to pay my mortgage. And so I always tell people, when you look at somebody who's working a lot, don't just take it that they're working a lot, because you don't know what else is going on. My husband had another stroke in April, and so my coping mechanism was working, and that's just what I do. And I recognize that that's not healthy long-term, and certainly I've taken steps back in the last 2 months to really moderate my business and my life. But at that point in time, as many people were struggling with anxiety and stress and emotion, this really helped me. And so I was thrilled to be able to do it, and I'm thrilled that it provided value to people. Big thing I'm also really proud of is that we accepted zero funding and zero sponsorship. We had 2 giveaways where people donated prizes to our participants, but I received no money, and none of the presenters received any money for their time. And so that was really important to me, that the sessions continue to remain free. They're not behind a paywall. They never will be. And that is a big thing that we miss in aquatics, is having the opportunity to receive training from many of these professionals who charge money to speak at conferences. And yet, if you're in a small community and you don't have a PD budget, I wanted to provide that access for many of my favorite presenters on many topics that I've seen in my consulting and coaching work people are missing. Sorry, I'm just trying to advance. So the #1 question I get about my sessions is, how did you know, Katie, to build this thing? How did you know to start POOLaide? Where did it come from? Like, what was it? And the only way I can answer this question is to share with you, we're in the second half of the presentation, we're going to the lessons learned. So the lessons that I have learned joining the private sector, as well as the lessons that we've all learned with the coronavirus pandemic. So I would identify as a highly sensitive person, or I have a sensory processing sensitivity. That's not just introversion. That is, being very distracted by loud noises, smells, textures, like just hyper-stimulated life, which is great. It's a very rich life, but it does mean that I have a very strong instinct for body language, cues that are spoken, unspoken. I can see things and I can take a whole bunch of information and I can see that person at work who's struggling, or I can see that facility on a conference call that there's unspoken tension, right? I have an ability to see things before other people see them. And so I was very lucky in this situation, based on my own knowledge of COVID and that flight in January, to really anticipate that this would bring our world to a halt. I don't have a crystal ball, but I just knew it was going to be big. And it did end up being bigger than I anticipated. But I knew if we were going to not be working, we would need to do something. And let's take, a silver lining. What can we do in this time? The big thing I need to tell you, though, is that a few years ago, I would not have had the same instinct. So when I was a municipal aquatic manager, or when I was a lifeguard working at a nonprofit post-secondary institution, I would not have had the skills to know that I needed to do POOLaide. What caused me now in 2020 to know to build POOLaide was because I learned how to run a business, not just a swimming pool, when I left my municipal job and I became a full-time business owner. And those are some of the lessons I want to share with you today, as well as the Corona lessons, because I really want you to leave thinking that, you don't need to go to business school, you don't need to have formal training, but you do need to spend some more time learning about business, because that's going to make you a better aquatic professional. And that is something that I didn't realize we were so blind to until I went to the other side and was able to look back and see this big gap. So many of you are working in the public sector. So many of you are working for municipalities, local governments, nonprofit organizations such as YMCAs, Boys and Girls Clubs, post-secondary institutions, all of that. And that is perfectly fine. But it's important to understand that in the public sector, that means that we have public funding and that we are engaged in providing services to our ratepayers and our communities. Things are slow moving, but very stable, and we are able to service perhaps minority or underprivileged populations because that's a community mandate. So I was on that side for many, many years. When I switched to my business full-time in 2018, I joined the private sector. So what that means is I have my business, Lakeview Aquatic Consultants. We are for-profit. For-profit doesn't need to be bad words. For-profit means I get to pay my mortgage, right? That's the goal. And so it's controlled by myself, which is an individual, or you have your swim schools that are controlled by organizations, and it is our revenue that funds operations. We are subject to competition between different organizations. Clients can choose us, or they cannot choose us. The big one is that we are subject to market conditions. So the way I explain this to a lot of people is you have your gym or your weight room at your municipal aquatic facility. It's affordable, but it doesn't have the newest, trendiest fitness classes because they would not be in demand by your client base, and people would be unprepared to pay for premium products, right? That's why there's variety in the marketplace. I can pay $10 for a yoga class at the community center, or I can pay $20 for a yoga class in a heated studio with scented towels and, mood music and all of that jazz. That's really the difference between these two. And I highlight this because it leads us to my lessons that I have learned since joining the private sector, which is we all in aquatics, we've stopped learning. We are so good at leading that we stop learning. And stick with me for a moment, because I'm not saying that you don't recertify your quals, you don't attend conferences, you don't do networking. I know you do that. I truly do. I know that you're on newsletter lists. I know that you get tons of great information from sources. But I would hazard a guess in your day-to-day work, pre-COVID, post-COVID, you were so focused on leading your aquatics team, leading your department, leading your rec facility. You've got that handled, right? We love to train our staff. We love to build them up and send them off into the world. We are so focused on leading, though, many of us have stopped learning. And we kid ourselves by thinking, oh, I went to this conference. Oh, I read this article. I called into that networking event. But we're dialing it in. We're just calling it in. We're not actually learning. And when I joined the private sector and I went, oh, geez, I don't have an IV salary every 2 weeks. Like, I don't have an injection of cash every 2 weeks. I literally have to compete. I need to see what people want. I need to learn. That is something that was missing in my competency in the aquatics industry. And I would really argue that you need that skill set even as a municipal aquatic manager or coordinator or programmer. So a couple lessons from the private sector, and then we're going to move into our Corona lessons. So lessons from the private sector, I would encourage you to adopt some of them, all of them. Please do not be overwhelmed. I hate those conference sessions where you're learning, you're enjoying it, and then somebody gives you a long list of things that you have to figure out how to implement when you're overworked, underpaid, and on deadline, okay? This session is going to be about small wins consistently, so pick a few things. Do not get overwhelmed. I don't expect mastery in the next 2 weeks. We are still living in a pandemic. Focus on what is achievable, okay? So lessons I would give to you from the private sector, this will apply to everyone in a certain degree, so don't tune any of these out. You need to learn the basics of running a profitable business. Doesn't need to be a formal university course. It could be a book. It could be a podcast. It could be finding a family member or a friend that works in a business sector. Is somebody a manager at Walmart? Does somebody run a nail salon, right? Just talk to your hairstylist when you get your hair cut. Learn business tips anywhere you go. Start that conversation with the barista at Starbucks. You need to develop your business instinct, your gut game. We are so set in society about looking for black and white values. We want something to be official. We don't want something to be touchy-feely. The reality is you and your gut game, what your gut is telling you is the God's honest truth about the situation. And we have been inculcated to ignore that when the reality is not everything is obvious and your gut game is going to be stronger sometimes than what is publicly stated or publicly written. So I would encourage you to really, in situations where there's a divergence between what you're being told to do or what you think you should do and what your gut tells you, you need to stop and listen. And over time, that will really guide you to make better decisions. In the private sector, agility is imperative. If you don't perform, you will perish. Whether you're a restaurant, a gym, a cleaning service company, you need to perform consistently or you will perish. And part of that is going to be innovation. We're seeing this now in the second half of 2020. Those pools, those municipalities, those organizations that offer web programming, private lessons, mechanisms to control the risk of the virus and provide a service, they're going to win, okay? And everybody has access to the same information. It's how they run with it. Nobody will do the work for you. I know that sounds obvious, but I see too many people who depend on other people to figure it out or do it. I can tell you I am a Luddite, which means I'm not into technology. I don't have an iPhone. I just got a Fitbit after years of not having any sort of smart, bio device. I didn't know YouTube. I sat down and I learned how to do it because nobody else is going to do it. The same way many of us work with communications departments and we wait on someone else to do what we need. Sometimes you just have to do it yourself, particularly in a situation over the next few months as we continue to have reduced capacity in many of our organizations to get the work done. I'm sure many of you have co-workers, colleagues, organizations that are working on a shoestring budget with lower staff capacity, right? So we are all being asked to do more. Social media is not optional. Not much to say there other than if it's 2020 and your pool does not have a social media account that is specific to the pool, I'm not talking rec center, I'm not talking recreation department, specific to the pool, you are missing the boat. And I know that is very hard to get communications departments to sign off on that, but can you imagine the coronavirus, the last 4 months, if you had not had Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, right? This is how we thrive, okay? So social media is not optional. You need to have a personality, okay? Gone is the time where we're very, prim, formal. We don't admit that there was diarrhea in the pool last night. We say there was a contamination, right? We need to be honest and authentic. That is what people expect. The same way those of you who know me, you are here because you know what to expect from Katie and Lakeview Aquatic Consultants. You either like what you're getting or you don't. We need to attract and repel. We cannot service everyone. Even in our municipal situations where we are intended to service everyone, we need to provide that authentic voice to what our priorities are and mandates. And you need to understand your product and your brand, because every pool is not the same. Every philosophy, every organizational structure is different in terms of what the pool means. So those people who functioned effectively during this period of uncertainty were the ones who won. Functioning effectively amidst uncertainty, those who can do it win. You have to take a claim and commit to what you're doing, knowing that it can or will change. Making good decisions is like playing poker. You're gambling with reality. I will tell you, I make mistakes every day. I fall on my face, I have catastrophic failures, I lose money, and I learn. You have to get on with it. There is no safety net for anyone, so stop waiting for a safety net. So now we get to the last part of the talk, which is the coronavirus, right? It's probably the worst word of 2020. It could be a swear word for some people. The reality of your corona experience is different for each one of you on this session, depending on your location, your job security, your organization, your family. My heart goes out to all of you that have struggled during the last 4 months. It's been an incredible time and not in a good way, okay? So the good news is things are improving, stabilizing in Canada for the moment. Who knows what the future will bring, but it's important that you understand that you have been changed as a person and take those things that you've learned and that change, right? The cliche, diamonds are made under stress. Right? Take that period of change and embrace it. Do not try and return to the old ways. That's never coming back. So a couple of workplace lessons. Feel free to add some in the chat box that you have learned. I could not include every workplace lesson, but just some general ones. Most of us can work from anywhere, anytime. Obviously recognizing we can't really teach swimming lessons on this platform, but I'm sure some will try. Everything we used to do no longer applies. We need to adapt on the fly with limited information. Those of you right now programming for September, I feel for you. We don't know what September will look like. Even school boards, there's divergences in what school boards are doing. How can we know what pools will look like? We don't, but we have to make a decision and stick to it. Less certainty, more inquiry, right? So we have to be willing to be flexible. Most aquatic professionals are, but I do find after you get off deck, after you move into management, you start to get more comfortable with being set. And we need to go back to those early on guard shifts when you first started out, when you might have to talk to a customer, you might have to do first aid, you might get pulled into a lesson, right? Our work is very dynamic. And so we need to continue to be more flexible and ask more questions. Workers value flexibility and humanity, a human workplace. Those of you that had a negative experience over the last few months, you probably noticed that your workplace or your organization didn't have the humanity that you needed during this time of stress. Organizational values are more important than ever. So if you can't name your organizational values or your team values, that is something that you need to work on pronto. Because if you don't know your values, you don't have a compass. And it doesn't need to be a fancy workshop. You don't need to spend thousands of dollars. You just have to say what's important to me, Katie, or what's important to Lakeview, right? And they may change. The next 6 months, your values may be different from 2025, and that's to be expected, but drawing back to your values or your start with why, for those of you Simon Sinek fans, that's going to be critical. People want autonomy. They want to be able to set their schedule and feel like they have some shred of control over their life. That is the big thing that many traditional workers lost, that sense of control, that routine of commuting to work, working away from the home, going to the grocery store, going to a restaurant, and coming back again. And we also, in the last few months, we've been focusing on accomplishments, not results. So there is a big difference. Accomplishments is teaching a child how to swim. The result is the Swim Kids 4 badge. There are differences. We all know kids that have a badge and they cannot swim to save their life, literally. We need to focus on the accomplishment of, creating a safe workplace, getting to work on time in a mental capacity to do the job, supporting our colleagues, right? That is very different from the results of opening the pool or filling lessons or growing revenue, right? There are distinctions we need to make. So the framework I have for the last few slides is start, change, and continue for our lessons post-COVID. I love this framework. I learned this at the University of Toronto. I would encourage you to use this for any framework that you have, whether it's for performance management of staff, whether it's for instructor candidates, whether it's for lifeguards, right? It can be for your children. You can use this anytime. This framework is slightly better, in my opinion, because it's more robust than your sandwich, right? Your traditional sandwich of positive, negative, positive, right? Or Red Cross, as a Red Cross trainer, right? We have group feedback, specific feedback, try it again, GST, right? Start, change, continue is a little bit more robust because we focus on things to start doing, things to change doing, and things to continue doing, okay? So an example could be, I want you to start using a lesson plan in the water when you teach lessons. I need you to change that you're turning your back to the kids during front glides, and I'd like you to continue being on time for shifts and respecting your colleagues, right, in the workplace. So here are my short top 5 start, change, and continue for coronavirus pandemic, things that we've learned in the workplace. Again, I would encourage you to add in the chat box any that you have found that worked for you, your workplace. This is just a sampling. I can't cover all of them, and I know myself personally, I have grown so much in the last 6 months, as I'm sure you have too. So I'm going to start, right, July moving forward in our back end, let's say, of the coronavirus pandemic until wave 2. I'm going to start learning how to do things for myself. So I don't want to, but I'm going to learn more about how to edit videos. I'm going to learn more about YouTube. I'm going to learn more about SEO. Right? I'm going to start learning those things for myself. I'm going to start following my instincts in all areas of my career, not just in my personal life with friendships, but I'm going to follow those instincts in my career. What is a good business partnership? What is a good client? What is a beneficial relationship? Right? If it doesn't feel right, it's probably not going to be. I'm going to start trusting my staff and trusting myself. So this is particularly acute for me because I have been thinking about hiring someone for a while. It's a lot of work to run a business in multiple provinces, and I haven't been willing to trust somebody to do the work that I do, which, as we all know, we're guilty of not delegating. We can do the best job, right? We'll just do it, right? We sometimes are a martyr to the workload. So I need to start trusting someone else, and I need to trust myself that I have the instinct to select the right person to do that job. You need to trust your staff, right? They are competent people. And we also need to focus on those small wins. So I mentioned those small steps. This is not the year where we say, a big goal. And if you haven't changed your vision board for the year, or you don't have a vision board for the year, I would encourage you now to do a reset. The second half of 2020, decide for yourself, what are your goals at home? What are your goals at work? What are your goals for the work team? Everything I planned in January, I had to throw out. And there's no sense holding on to that old image. It's just gone. But start on small steps. So maybe your small steps are, we want to get the pool reopened safely. Difficult to quantify or qualify, but it's a small step. I guarantee you very few of you are thinking, I want to fill all my lessons. I want to fill all my shifts. I want to fill and open every pool in my municipality. We need small steps. We need small wins. The reason for that is because small wins are vital in these circumstances. Excuse me. It's when things get really bad that small wins become especially vital. A small win is a concrete, complete, self-contained, implemented outcome of moderate importance. On its own, one small win may seem unimportant, but a series of wins begins to reveal a pattern that may attract allies, deter opponents, and lower resistance to subsequent proposals. Small wins are compact, tangible, upbeat, non-controversial. I liken this to making your to-do list for the day and then putting make list right at the top, right? Small win, I don't care how stupid it sounds, do it, right? You need those small wins. Small wins are getting to work on time, having the mental capacity to do the job, making sure your guards are safe. Nobody drowned today. I used to tell my staff in High River and they would laugh at me. Nobody drowned today, we did our job. That's the win. Why are we so focused sometimes on things that, I mean, we all learned during the corona pandemic what really matters, right? Health, safety, basic happiness, basic essential needs. Our change, what are things that we need to change coming out of this period of physical isolation? Practices we adopted or practices that we had. This could also be called stop if you're doing this with staff, like things that you actually need to stop. My number one, some of you have heard me rant about this, we need to stop requiring video on conference calls. So right now I'm delivering a session, I'm very animated with my hands, I'm committed to being on camera, I've got my makeup on, I'm all set. But requiring your employees to be visible during a routine meeting is akin to helicoptering that your guard needs to be in the chair or standing on the pool deck to be working, right? How many of us have ever been harassed by, and not harassed in a very negative way, but just annoyed by a dry person who says, well, I didn't see you doing this, or when did this happen? They don't believe you because they don't see you. A lot of our work is invisible. If you think you need to see your staff member, you're doing the same helicoptering. When the reality is for privacy reasons, for safety reasons, for poverty reasons, you should not require visible cameras, right? This is huge for me. And I think a lot of people misunderstand what the Zoom can provide. There is no reason you need to see that person, okay? And I think that needs to change or stop. You need to change making decisions that do not align with your organizational values. So as I mentioned, if you don't have organizational values, don't fret. Just kind of start to make a list about what things matter to you. Does flexibility matter more than financial compensation? Does safety or humanity in the workplace matter more than efficiency, right? Just pick some words and find some kind of themes for your work. And when you go forward, you need to reflect your work against those themes. Because if you don't, there's going to be a disparity and it's going to materialize somewhere in the process. Another big one is looking to others as experts and copying their actions. So this was a big one I continue to see, unfortunately, in the industry. I connect with clients and colleagues every single day. I'm active on Facebook groups, I'm active on Instagram, my phone, I'm getting texts and calls all the time. I understand looking for a mentor. I understand looking for an industry expert, right? People have asked me all the time, what would you do in this situation? I am happy to share my information with the caveat of what qualifies me to make that suggestion based on my physical experience or based on my risk management background or based on these considerations. But what really scares me sometimes in these Facebook groups is I see somebody in a community looking wholesale for an example from another community that is not at all interconnected with a pool that is completely different circumstances, different staff, and they think it is safer to copy for my community what I see in that community. As we know from lifeguarding, yes, the standard of care that you will be measured against in a court of law is your regional industry best practices, what are most people doing? But I can guarantee you with the coronavirus, there is no standard of care currently. It is still developing. You need to do the research yourself, and you need to be confident yourself, and that's literally the only person that you are accountable to is your organization, your upper management, and your ratepayers. Please, please, please stop looking to copy others. Small talk needs to go away. We discovered during the coronavirus how critical it was to be honest and authentic. If I had asked any single one of you in early April, how are you? Right? You would have looked at me and gone, crazy? This is an awful, awful month of my life. Small talk needs to go away. I had this conversation many, many times with a colleague I worked with. She was of the opinion that everybody should be greeted every single morning. So, good morning, Katie. Nice to see you. And I'm not suggesting that we don't make small talk sometimes, but we really need to read the room better, right? I have clients with whom I will spend 10 minutes sharing pleasantries, asking about their kids. That is what it is. But in the reality of COVID and going forward, we need to be more adept at reading the room. And in the absence of reading the room, we need to be slightly less Canadian and just get on with it, right? It's not benefiting anyone. And if somebody truly needs help, they're not necessarily going to offer it or say that they need it based on just a how are you, right? 2 days after my husband had a stroke, somebody says, how are you? I mean, I'm just not going to get into it, right? It's hard, right? So just be aware that small talk is not always beneficial. And then the last one is expecting employees to work a traditional work day. So I fully recognize that to guard pools, to run swimming lessons, we do need people to work set schedules that are typically 8 hours, right? Or 4 hours or 5 hours. I would just encourage you going forward to really reflect on how you have experienced the coronavirus pandemic, what worked for you, and be a little bit aware of how different schedules suit different people and their needs. So my household, we don't have children. And so for me, I just start working whenever I want to start working. I stop whenever I want to stop, usually for lunch or to go to a fitness class. And then I will often restart much later in the day. So perhaps today I work 9 to 2, and then I work 5 to 9. That's just my life rhythm. Other people with children, I heard during the coronavirus pandemic, they needed to work 5 a.m. to 9. Then they were homeschooling, and then they needed to work from 7 to 10. So the flexibility piece, I would encourage you to keep looking at that going forward and be more creative in the seasons of life and what works best to get the best results. Because I provide really good results on my schedule. I do not provide really good results when I need to be bum in a chair for 8 hours. That's the illusion of work versus the reality of work. And the big piece is that people don't trust the competency of their employees. So your team members are adults who can think, reason, and communicate. Treat them and expect them to contribute to their success. Rather than continuing to watch and correct, right? Think about those helicoptering moments or those bulldozing moments. Help them to understand your perspective and your needs. Then create clear boundaries and guardrails so that they can be safe and successful without your watchful eye. This is an excellent book I would recommend. I've just started reading it, The Long Distance Leader. He wrote this before the coronavirus, but a lot of what he talks about is very, very applicable to the world that we're living in right now with remote workplaces. Last lessons that I would encourage you to do are to continue. Things that you have probably already started, and so I would encourage you not to let them lapse or let them go away. Continue to do them. Even though there may be a shift, you go back into the pool, you go back into the office, you go back into a more traditional workplace, keep doing these things. Continue on. You are better because of it. Honest communication, right? Honest communication cuts through a lot of wasted red tape and time. People want honesty. Doesn't mean you need to be blatant or graphic or rude, but you just need to be honest and say, you know what? I heard this many times during the last few months. My kid's having a tantrum, I'm going to have to call you back. Or my husband needs help with this. Or I don't know where this is, I'm just going to have to call you back later, right? I can get on with my work, so can you if we're honest. Better collaboration and fewer silos. So we had to communicate because we were in our houses or in our homes as opposed to in a workplace. Often open workplaces, in my experience, have more siloing because they expect there to be better communication, and the ironic consequence is there is less communication. So continue that collaboration, whether that's through a formal software, check-in meetings, group emails, Padlet, Google Classroom, but continue that collaboration, because often we have very little trickle down to our guards and our deck staff. It's all upper management, you don't need to know that. But we really had collaboration because we had things changing so rapidly in the last few months that we just had to use everyone who could help. Time blocking your work around your life. I've been doing this since I started working for myself in 2018. I can tell you this is life-changing. That is something as simple as making yourself go to a fitness class over the lunch hour, going for a walk, having a date with your kids in the middle of the day. Figure out what that looks like for you, but it's your life around your work to the degree to which you can, okay? Focus on the accomplishment, not the activity. So sitting bum in a chair for 8 hours if you get nothing done, that no longer flies. In a workplace situation that is helicopter, they want to see a bum in a chair, yeah, you're not getting anything done. Now is the time of efficiency. If it takes you 5 minutes and it's done, great. Do something else. Go for a stretch, fold some laundry, right? Go check on the pool, right? It's no longer this, 8 hours, 16 hours, it's more flexible. Employee independence is huge. Let your employees work on their own to the degree which is safe and appropriate. Allow them radical creativity. So every bad idea, like, oh, I'm not sure if we should do this, is usually really a good idea. It just needs to be filtered. That radical creativity, whether I created webinars, whether you teach swimming lessons in a bathtub, whether you teach babysitting on Zoom, whatever that looks like, that radical creativity is where you will see success. That is where private business sees success. That is where aquatics can see success, because there is no boundary, right? And that growth mindset that we've all had, that I have to change. The way I did it last session is not going to work. That growth mindset should stay. Being open to, there's no routine yet. There's no real plan yet. So what I'd like to leave you on is this quote, and I want to thank Charlene in Richmond Hill. She shared this with me a few days ago on Facebook, and I think this perfectly encapsulates where we are at in 2020 in July. The difficulty lies not so much in developing new ideas, but escaping the old ones, right? We have to throw the baby out with the bathwater sometimes. We have to get rid of that plan, right? I had to get rid of my 2020 goals from January. They're useless. I had to let go of our vacation plans for September. I had to, I just had to move on. I needed to start with a clean slate. And I recognize that that's terrifying. It's exhausting. It's not what you thought you would have to be doing in your aquatics career. We're built on legacy in aquatics. You probably never thought you would ever need to change anything significantly. Oops, surprise, right? This is a mulligan. We're changing everything. So escape the old ideas and go with the new ones. And you're gonna make mistakes. I've made a gazillion mistakes in the last couple months, but you know what? Any success that people perceive that we are having is because I was willing to make mistakes and move on and be an adult and continue to grow myself as an aquatic professional. So I want to say a big thank you for spending the hour with me. I hope you found some value in this session. You can connect with me now in the chat box. We're going to do a Q&A. You can also please do feel free to continue the conversation offline. My number is publicly listed, right? You can text me, you can call me, email. I'm very active on Facebook and Instagram. I love to hear from you. There is no stupid question. I love to know what's working, what's not working. If you need help, right? My husband will tell you I'm so bad at charging money, right? I just want to make sure that water is safe and that people are learning how to swim. Water safety and drowning prevention, right? That's why we're here, right? That is our passion. We want a Canada free from drowning. We want to eradicate drowning, both fatal and non-fatal. That's ultimately why we're here. But the biggest challenge in 2020 is how we do it is like nothing we could have ever been prepared for. So thank you so much. That's what I've got for this morning.